Okay, we're going to be hot in 15 seconds, people. Stand by. Queue open.
Talent, check your spot.
Audio up.
Clear the set, everybody.
Stand by camera 3. Stand by camera 1. Camera 4, check your focus.
Carol, make sure the phone guests are standing by.
Stand by camera 2.
Okay, Don, we're ready out here.
Okay, thanks. Let's rock and roll. Count them in.
10, 9,
Here we go.
8,
Flying graphic.
7,
Camera 2, I'm going to be coming to you
5,
first. Stand by to cue mark.
4, 3, 2.
And cue mark.
Hello, I'm Mark Crutcher, President of Life Dynamics, and this is Life Talk for July 2015. As always, the first thing on the agenda is Life Talk News. Alan couldn't be here this month, and filling in for him is Belinda Lane. Belinda?
Thanks, Mark. In an update to a previous Life Talk news story, an Oklahoma abortion doctor arrested for selling abortions to non-pregnant women has been bound over to face trial. Naresh Patel was charged in December after undercover agents set up appointments with the abortionist where they say he administered ultrasounds and pregnancy tests and then told them they were pregnant when they were not. He waived his right to a preliminary hearing, which means he's now bound over for trial. In addition to the 3 counts of obtaining money under a false pretense, the Oklahoma State Attorney General has added a charge of conspiracy to commit a felony. Court papers also allege one victim, who was never pregnant, died of cervical cancer just 4 months after Patel performed an abortion on her. In a similar story, an Indiana abortion clinic with a history of health code violations has reportedly closed its doors following criminal charges filed against the abortionist. According to reports, abortionist Ulrich Klopfer, who operates the Friendship Family Planning Abortion Clinic in Gary, surrendered the clinic's license to health officials in May. Ken Severson, spokesman for the Indiana Department of Health, stated that the abortion clinic's closure came following a 1,833 count complaint against Klopfer with the state's medical licensing board, as well as criminal charges of failing to report an abortion he performed on a 13-year-old child. The licensing board is allowing him to keep his medical license pending the state's investigation. A 54-year-old Texas pro-choice man has been sentenced to 50 years in prison after authorities say he raped and impregnated a teen and then forced an abortion on her. According to court testimony, Mauricio Hernandez, who worked as a school custodian, sexually assaulted the 14-year-old victim, impregnated her, then gave her pills, forcing her to deliver a baby in a soccer park portable toilet. At the time, the victim was about 8 months pregnant and said she heard a large plop, and when she looked into the waste tank, she saw a small hand in the water. According to a police report, the victim's mother noticed that her daughter was bleeding and took her to the hospital. Police say Hernandez made no attempt to rescue the newborn because he was afraid of getting in trouble. The baby later was found submerged in the toilet, where prosecutors say she drowned. A Connecticut pro-choice man has been found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and being an accessory to murder after hiring a hitman to kill his girlfriend. The 21-year-old victim, Shamari Jenkins, was 4 months pregnant when she was shot in the back. Police say her ex-boyfriend, 23-year-old Carlton Bryan, paid a friend to kill her because he did not want to be saddled with a child, and Jenkins refused to have an abortion. In a victory for pro-life students in Idaho, Boise State University has revised its policy for campus demonstrations to allow controversial events without warning signs. The decision follows a lawsuit filed by Alliance Defending Freedom on behalf of the pro-life student group Abolitionists for Life. ADF said that school officials required the warning signs when the group announced plans to use abortion images for 2 events on campus. The first event used graphic photos of abortions, and the second event used autopsy photos of an 18-year-old who had died from her abortion. Those photos were released by Life Dynamics on their website, safeandlegal.com, after the victim's mother requested they be made public. Attorneys say the school's policy discriminated against the pro-life club and did not apply to other groups, including Planned Parenthood, which holds events at the school. In addition to changing their policy to allow free speech to pro-life groups, the university agreed to pay $20,000 in damages plus attorney fees. In the ongoing trend of abortion clinics closing, a killing center in the heart of the nation's capital has announced it will be closing. Planned Parenthood in D.C., which has been the site of numerous pro-life demonstrations and was featured in Life Dynamics Field Maafa 21, said they are closing while they look for a new location in the area. In 2009, that Planned Parenthood paid $1.5 million in damages to the family of a teenage girl whose abortion left her permanently disabled. The center was also the target of an undercover investigation conducted by Life Dynamics, which documented how the abortion industry covers up for men who sexually abuse children. In the call, an employee of this Planned Parenthood can be heard telling what they thought was a 13-year-old girl impregnated by adult male that they never tell the police or other officials about these situations. You can listen to that entire call at childpredators.com. In Dallas, Texas, one of the oldest and most politically active abortion mills in the state is shutting its doors. A representative of the Ruth Street Abortion Clinic has told the Life Dynamics caller that the facility will close permanently after the Fifth Circuit of Appeals ruled that a Texas law regulating abortion clinics is constitutional. Under the new law, facilities providing abortions must meet the same health and safety standards as other ambulatory surgical centers, and the abortionist must have admitting privileges in a local hospital. The decision is being appealed to the United States Supreme Court. In Columbus, Georgia, Seneca Choices for Life says it's going to open up a facility just 10 feet away from the notorious Columbus Women's Health Organization abortion clinic owned by Diane Dirtzis. Dirtzis, who claims that God wants her to provide abortions, previously ran the New Woman All Women facility in Birmingham, Alabama, which was forced to close after a scathing 176-page deficiency report was filed by state health inspectors. The pro-life center is coming under some heat for their decision to operate in the face of the abortion clinic, but the group says they are going forward and will not be bullied into a corner. Finally, CNS News is reporting that in 37 straight surveys conducted over the course of 21 years by the Gallup Polling Company, a solid majority of Americans do not favor unrestricted abortion on demand. In the most recent survey conducted in May, 19% said abortion should never be legal, and another 36% said it should only be legal in a few circumstances. Only 29% said abortion should be legal under any circumstances. I'm Belinda Lane for Life Talk News. Additional details on these and other stories are available on the Life Dynamics blog. You can also get daily news updates by logging on to prolifeamerica.com. Mark, it's back to you.
Thanks, Belinda. Well, welcome back, everybody. I want to hear first off by my trusty sidekick, Renee Hobbs. Hello, Renee.
Hello.
And back again this month is, I'm not going to say it. Yes, I am. The Way of Suffering.
So close.
Yeah, so you got close, but I couldn't help it.
Next
Destiny
time.
Hernan de la Rosa. That de la Rosa comes from the Way of Suffering.
From the Way of Suffering.
Right, right. And of course, Father Frank Pavone, who knows all about that.
That's right.
verse.
Good to be here.
Thank you for being back again this month. Well, we've got a lot of things to talk about as usual, so we might as well get right to it. First off, in politics, one of the things that is almost unbelievable, even by abortion industry standards, this bill in California that's going to require crisis pregnancy centers by law to give referrals to abortion clinics and to tell every person that they deal with that, hey, one of your options is abortion, and if you want one, here's where you can go to get it.
Well, it's absolutely astonishing, and I hope that in these pregnancy centers, they can go a little bit further and let them know, some more information. Since we have to refer you, let us also refer you to Rachel's Vineyard or a group that can handle and help clean up the emotional mess that you're going to be left with.
Yeah, just imagine if Texas were to pass a law that, like you're saying, required abortion clinics to say, now listen, I know you're here for an abortion, but if you don't think this is right for you, if you really don't want to do this, call the, White Rose Crisis Pregnancy Center in Dallas or whatever, and they can help you with, with all these services. These people would go nuts. They would go berserk if somebody tried to enforce a
Well,
law
and
like
I would
that.
say here in Texas it's a booklet that they actually have to make available to the women. So of course you would think that means they put it in their hands with all their options. But they've said at most of these clinics they just pin it to a bulletin board on the wall, and that covers making the other resources available to them. So they're not offered the option of adoption or any type of pregnancy counseling.
No, it's obscene what these people
All
do.
about their agenda and making money.
It's all about money.
Yes.
And that's right, Renee. When you boil this thing down, it always comes down to money. Always. Nice thing is, In Texas, abortion clinics continue to close in record numbers because of HB2, House Bill 2, that was passed a couple of years ago. And y'all may be aware that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that as constitutional. And the pro-aborts had challenged it because a second round of restrictions goes into place in September. And just to give you an idea of the numbers, when HB2 passed, there were over 40 abortion clinics in Texas. Now there are either 17 or 18. And they're saying that in September, over half of them are going to close, and they'll be down to 7 or 8 in Texas, and most of those will be hanging on by a thread. Planned Parenthood has already announced, we just got this yesterday, that they have no plans to put any more abortion clinics in Texas. And I say good riddance to them. So this legislation that was passed here is being looked at by states all over the country. I've talked to people, and I'm sure you have too.
That's right. Yes. We've been encouraging the other states to do exactly this.
It's the same thing that Texas is doing.
Yeah.
And to give you an idea of the potential for this, you and I found that report. In the first 6 months after HB2, the first wave of HB2, not the second one that's coming, but the first one, in the first 6 months, there were 4,600 fewer abortions in Texas than there were in the previous 6 months. And so that's a 9,200 fewer abortions per year on average. And this is going to impact it even more, is what they're saying. And so we may be looking at, and you know, even some of the pro-aborts are saying things like, well, in Texas, Roe versus Wade has been overturned. You know, Roe versus Wade doesn't exist anymore, or it soon won't exist in the state of Texas. And what's scaring the life out of the pro-aborts is that this thing keeps on getting upheld by the courts, and if it continues to do that, other states are going to do that, obviously.
Right.
But what's really scaring them is that you could end up with the second most populous state in the union, Texas, and the fastest growing state in the union by a long shot, with basically abortion being winnowed out.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
And that's what's scaring them to death. And yet, Roe versus Wade still is the law of the land. And this goes along with something that you and I have talked about for years, Father Frank.
Yes.
We're going to win this thing community by community.
Right.
We can win it even if Roe versus Wade stays in place.
That's right, because these laws are not saying abortion is illegal. They're not
Right.
saying the unborn are protected. What they're really saying to the abortion industry is, if you want to claim that this is part of women's health, then act like it.
Right.
Well, why don't they want to live up to the standards of surgical centers?
Yeah.
They don't, because they can't.
They can't.
Which of course is the message of line 5.
Right.
And yet, so what we're saying is very, very reasonable. You know, this is healthcare. This is surgery. Really? This is a medical procedure? No, I don't think so, because you're not even acting like it.
Right. Well, in the news, we covered the Ruth Street abortion clinic closing
Yes.
in Dallas.
Yes.
And if you're outside the Dallas-Fort Worth area or outside Texas, that probably doesn't mean too much to you. But that was one of the primary political pushers of abortion in Texas, and it's a big thing that Ruth Street's going under.
That's right.
They haven't closed as of today. They haven't closed, but one of our people here called them, and they told her that they're not going to be able to meet the standards, and so the abortionists decided they're just going to close. And
It's just a victory for the pro-lifers.
It's a huge victory. And the thing about Ruth Street is it shared a wall with the White Rose Pregnancy Center. And so you actually had, kind of like the verse I said before you, life and death, choose life.
Right.
You had them right next to one another. And sometimes people would accidentally go to the pregnancy center and get counseling. You had people out there who are able to actually give women other options. And I think that's where we need to understand, while these are huge victories, it's only half the work. Unfortunately, women are still going to be facing crisis pregnancies.
Absolutely.
So this really means we have to step up and give them options here in
Right.
Texas, because they don't have the option of abortion, of the violent choice anymore, but they do have a lot of other choices that they need to carefully consider about adoption or whether they're going to parent and place their child. And we need people in there who can love on these women and totally explore those options with them. So
Right.
now is the time to step up the volunteerism there.
another thing that happened last weekend, and it kind of didn't get a whole lot of notice, the new governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, signed legislation that was passed by the state legislature preventing Planned Parenthood from receiving money for cancer screenings under the basis of that the state of Texas said, we won't give money, whatever the money is being used for, to an organization that does abortions, meaning Planned Parenthood in this case. And of course, Planned Parenthood is going berserk saying, oh, all these women are going to die, as if women can't get cancer screenings anywhere in Texas except at Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, right.
And the outrage here is, first off, other healthcare providers are stepping forward. Actually, Planned Parenthood represents a tiny fraction of the total number of clinics in Texas, and they're stepping forward and saying, we'll do it, we'll take the money and we'll do the healthcare screening. But the outrage here is, why do we say to these women that we'll only pay for, why does Planned Parenthood want us to say, we'll only pay for your health care if you get it from abortionists? We wouldn't say that to women in general. And all these pro-aborts out here, and I've challenged some of them that I've been on radio with in the past. I remember a state representative from Virginia that I was on a debate with many years ago on a radio program. And she was talking about Planned Parenthood this and how great they are and wonderful. And I said, well, let me ask you this. Do you go to Planned Parenthood for your health care? Do you take your kids to Planned Parenthood for health care? No, well, I have a health care policy that covers. So it's only the poor that are relegated to getting all their health care from abortionists, but you wouldn't do it yourself. And I'll bet if you go into every state legislature in this country and you go into the United States Congress and ask all these leftist, godless degenerates who are pushing Planned Parenthood on poor women, how many of them get their health care from Planned Parenthood? I bet you it's a nice round number, 0.
That's right.
Yeah.
None of them take their family to Planned Parenthood. It's only good enough for poor, indigent women to get their health care from abortion.
And it kind of parallels the phenomenon of so many of people who are quote unquote pro-choice advocates wouldn't have an abortion themselves.
Absolutely.
When you go ask that same kind of question, would you're pushing abortion? Okay, would you have one? Oh, not for me, not for me.
Right.
Oh, let's explore why.
Right. I've challenged them on that before, and they'll say, well, I would never have an abortion, but I think it ought to be available. So in other words, you wouldn't kill your baby, but it's okay if she kills her baby. Her baby's not as good as yours.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
That's right. That's exactly what they're saying.
That's exactly what they're saying.
Well, and along the lines of the fact that Planned Parenthood really has said that it's the only option for Texas women. We don't have a lot of choices. A few years ago, I was uninsured and I needed to go get a well woman checkup, and I had the option of going to an emergency room, finding a doctor that was going to bill me, independently, or going to Planned Parenthood for $72, and it was based on a sliding scale. So they really are very competitive. But why are there not other options? And when I started exploring that, the federally qualified health centers, so many of them were closed down because they couldn't get government funding because all of the funding was going to Planned Parenthood. So when you talk about a choice, Texas women, uninsured Texas women, we don't have one. It's a monopoly here in Texas because Planned Parenthood has decided it's the only one who can give women any type of care. And they might be able to do cervical screenings, but didn't we decide they had like one mammogram machine somewhere in Waco? And somebody even said they're not even sure it's there. So as far as breast
it turned out there was
screenings,
none in Texas.
There's none, but
Right.
yet they put that down when really all they're doing is referring you to another doctor.
Well, the reason that those other clinics that you're talking about didn't get the health care, didn't get the like Title X money and so forth, is because they didn't have a gigantic lobbying apparatus behind them to go to the state legislature and say, give us the money.
Exactly.
But Planned Parenthood does. And so they're the ones who got all the money. And this idea that if you close down Planned Parenthood, they want you to think that, and they're actually saying things very similar to this, if we close down Planned Parenthood, and Abbott signed this bill saying they can't get any of this money for cancer screening, that we're not going to be able to walk down the streets of any city in Texas without stepping over the dead bodies of women. This is such incredible nonsense.
It's complete spin because in reality, uninsured Texas women don't have another choice besides Planned Parenthood. And that's what I was facing. Would I really let an abortionist put their hands on me if there was something wrong and you have to go to a level above the nurse practitioner? That's what you're doing. You're having to visit someone who takes a life and expect them to treat you with some sort of ethical, standards.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
Which they don't have.
No.
So I think what you're going to see is when this thing is fully implemented and all these Planned Parenthood facilities go broke, which is what we're hoping happens, that actually women do have more options than they have right now. Right now, this was their option.
Absolutely.
We're seeing the media, of course, put their spin on things. There's a story that we've talked about here before with Laura Smith, who died from an abortion in Massachusetts. Anyway, it's come back up now because this guy's losing his license, his privileges and so forth, and maybe going to jail, hopefully. the abortionist that did this. But the media is trying to put a spin on here, and I just saw this first paragraph in here. A lawyer for the family of a woman who allegedly died. How do you allegedly die?
Yeah, right.
Anyhow,
Golly.
either you're dead or you're not. I think she's allegedly dead. Anyway, during an abortion procedure at an unlicensed facility. This was an open abortion clinic that she went to. This was, and we've seen this, for example, how they'll spin things. This is a perfect example of it. When I wrote, you mentioned line 5 a minute ago. When I wrote that, we did research on how many women we could find that had died from abortion. We found a 2-year period where the CDC said 2 women died in this 2-year period nationwide from abortion. And we already had more documentation here than that. And so we just looked at those 2 years. And with our little meager resources here, with, small staff, tiny budget, we found 16 women here, just without leaving this office, that we could document had died from legal abortion during that 2-year period that the CDC said there were 2.
Right.
We picked out one of them to see, okay, here was one that we had the autopsy, we had the ambulance run sheet, we had the death certificate, we had everything here to show that this woman had died from an abortion. On the ambulance run sheet, it showed that she was picked up at an abortion clinic, and it said that she was DOA. She was picked up at the abortion clinic. She was dead when they picked her up, but she was ruled dead at the hospital when they brought her there. How did this one not get counted? And we knew this was one that didn't get counted.
Did they say it was pregnancy related?
Yeah, they eventually said that. But when we started looking at it, what we found out was they discovered the CDC, which we proved was run by practicing abortionists. The abortion surveillance branch at the CDC is run at that time by David Grimes, who was moonlighting as an abortionist at the Atlanta Surgery Center Abortion Clinic in Atlanta, Georgia. So obviously they're covering up all the injuries and deaths. What we discovered was that they found out the abortionist who killed her, and this was an abortion clinic that was advertised in the newspaper, had signs out in front, had an 800 number. It was a fully operating business. But they found out that he had allowed his medical license to lapse, which you might, like, for example, do something similar to that if you let your driver's license lapse. But that doesn't mean you still can't drive, or you go down, you get your license renewed, you pay your little $15 a year or whatever it is, and you're going about your business. That's what he had done, which is not uncommon for doctors to do. They just forget to re-up their medical license. But because he had done that, the CDC labeled that as an illegal abortion clinic, and therefore that was an illegal abortion, and they didn't have to count it as a death from legal abortion. And and the media plays into this. Mm-hmm. This is an example of this right here. They're spinning this thing saying this was an unlicensed facility. Well, what if there's an operating abortion clinic out here, and we see this all the time, where pro-lifers discovered that the abortion clinic doesn't have a license for something similar to this. Does the state come in and close them down? No, they don't. They never do. So they're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah,
here.
that's right.
That's exactly
Just anything to cover up abortion, yeah.
And then in the end, they'll say that the death from an abortion was actually pregnancy related. So then you get the statistics that it's actually more dangerous to be a pregnant woman than it is to have abortion.
Yeah,
so that's when abortion suddenly becomes safer.
Well, I wrote about that in line 5 because I used that example I just gave you about the one in Florida. I said this counts as a twofer.
It's disgusting, yeah, because
for
it's a hit
the
against
abortion
us
industry,
as well.
Because it didn't count against abortion.
Right.
And then the death certificate listed as a complication due to pregnancy.
Yep.
And so they say, see, abortion's safer than pregnancy. Well, yeah, if you count all your abortion deaths as pregnancy deaths, then yes, it's going to be safer.
The American women are being lied to because you see that thrown around all the time and held up on poster boards at rallies, and it's so ignorant. Like, look into it and find out what you're actually saying.
Hey, the New York Times came out with an article that's kind of related to abortion, something we've talked about here. New York Times now has published an article saying that the horrors of the population explosion that was predicted back in the 60s turned out to be a scam, basically. They're saying the unrealized horrors of population explosion. Paul Ehrlich, of course, as we know, is the guy that launched this with the so-called population bomb. I don't know if you've ever read any parts of it, but he predicted back in the 60s.
Standing room only, right?
Yeah, he predicted that by the mid-1980s there would be food riots in every major city in the United States. and that people would be just dropping dead from starvation, and that we couldn't sustain the population. And actually, the population grew more than he predicted it would, and he was predicting even if it grew at that rate, we were going to have these food riots all over the country. And it grew faster than that, and we had no food riots. But these leftists still push the population bomb and other similar things like that have been totally discredited as reasons, as justification for abortion. We've got to kill these kids because we just can't feed them all. It's not happening. And these people have been exposed as the frauds they are. And when you have even the godless leftist New York Times coming out here and saying this overpopulation horror never happened, and it's apparently been grotesquely exaggerated. It's getting pretty bad when even the New York Times.
They see the kind of trouble we're in and what abortion's doing to other countries.
Right, that's right. That's right. Where other countries now are having to pay women to have babies
Right.
because they're having shrinking populations. And one of the hidden parts of this is that population in the United States has actually decreased over the last 35 or 40 years if you take out immigration.
Right.
If you take immigration out of the mix, just our replacing our population and expecting it to grow normally, it's actually decreased.
There's been some good video documentaries on this whole question in recent years.
Yeah,
the demographic winter.
Demographic winter is one we've and demographic bomb.
Bomb. Right.
And these people are not pushing a pro-life or anti-contraception agenda. These are demographers who are saying, look, we've got a major problem.
Yeah.
We have major, and you're seeing in countries all over the world. Japan has got this problem. Spain is having, the Spanish parliament says they have to import 200,000 workers a year from other countries just to maintain their economy because they don't have enough people to work. Yeah. France is paying women to have babies. Russia now is paying women to have babies. In France and Russia, you don't have to be married. You don't have to be a certain age. If you'll have a baby, they'll give you money because they're having such a population problem.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
As far as, you remember the book Freakonomics that came out where they had the whole chapter on how crime in America was down because of abortion? And I'd heard it argued a long time ago when the book came out, but there's a popular television show that's terrible, no one should watch it, but it's called Orange is the New Black, and it's on Netflix. And their first episode, they actually did a whole thing where a girl in prison had 5 abortions, and she was crying over, these 5 children that she had lost. And they satirize her as this pro-life fanatic who bombs clinics and stuff. But the woman goes into explaining the Freakonomics thing, and I just thought, you brought up this stupid argument again that the reason that we have less crime is because we murder people in the womb. That's the whole argument. So what is your answer to the argument that we have less crime because all of the criminals were aborted?
Where's the evidence for that, first off? But the thing about you have to go read Freakonomics. There's a dual thing you have to connect there. It wasn't just that they were saying that we've lowered the crime rate through abortion, but they were saying the reason for that is because blacks have abortions at a higher rate than whites do. So really, there was a racial argument here. We talked about that Johnny talked about it in MAFA 21.
Okay.
There's a racial component here. They're saying that the beautiful part about in Freakonomics
is it gets rid of the undesirables.
It gets rid of the people who are the most crime-riddled population, which is blacks. And that's the argument that they were making. So if they want to make that argument, let's just throw that out on the table.
But that conveniently gets left out.
That gets left out of the equation, right? And I'd still say, okay, let's say that you leave the race out of it. Where is the evidence that we're only aborting the children who would have committed crimes? How do we know? We can now predict a baby in the womb is going to be the one that commits crimes. We know that, right? How is it we know that information? How do we figure that out? Right. I mean, we must be pretty smart to have figured all this out.
Well, and why stop there? I mean, we already know a bunch of people in those communities, low-income communities who are disadvantaged are going to commit crimes. So why don't we just go ahead and take care of all of them now if really crime's the problem? You are fighting crime by making murder the solution.
If you're going to use the Freakonomics model, you're right. Let's just go into the ghettos and round up all the 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds.
Right. Same argument. It boils down to the same argument.
It's the exact same argument. Yeah. Let's just go do that. That's the Freakonomics argument, and that's the argument these people. And of course, they get real uncomfortable when you start tying those things together.
Yes.
But they need to go read the book and see what these guys are saying. We had a horrific situation here in Dallas. A 14-year-old girl was was impregnated by a family member. 4 of the family members assaulted this little girl. They jumped up and laid her on the floor, jumped up and down on top of her abdomen to make her have an abortion, which she eventually did. It was one of the most horrific things you've ever heard. But again, my argument would be they were talking about this baby was killed by these 4 adults jumping up on top of this little girl, 13, 14-year-old girl, holding her down. And one of the people, I think the leader of this thing was another woman, was the leader of this deal. But as far as that baby's concerned, how is that different than if they had taken her to Blue Street or to any other abortion clinic? You know, it's not any different. It's the exact same
The
thing.
brutality of it, she gave birth. They burned the baby.
They burned the baby in a backyard barbecue grill.
It was absolutely disgusting. And yeah, so we need abortion, right? Because otherwise stuff like this will happen. But we have abortion and stuff like this is happening.
Well, it's like every month we report on these women that are usually it's teenage girls who have a baby and drop the baby in the toilet at the high school or in a bar or something. We had that one girl that had her baby in a bar and then went back out and went back to drinking.
Right.
I thought abortion was supposed to end all this.
Right.
That's what we were promised 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
All it's done is devalue human life in every capacity.
The smitten kitten. Remember this story? In Minneapolis, a small private school up there, the director allowed elementary school children to be taken from the school to be taken to this sex toy company called the Smitten Kitten, where they were shown around the place, shown all the stuff that's in there, I think they were given complimentary condoms. One of these children was 10 years old. One of the parents talking about her 10-year-old was taken here to this place. It's called the Smitten Kitten. I'm telling you right now, when my daughter was 10 years old, if she'd have come home and told me that the school she went to took her to one of these places, there would have been blood in the water before the night was over.
I agree with you. I have 3 kids, 2 middle school and 1 high school, and I would flip out if I found out that my children were taken on a field trip to a sex shop.
A sex toy shop. This is where we've come to in this culture. It's
That's right.
It's unbelievable.
Unfortunately, I think it's stolen the innocence of so many children, because I know that I have 6 and 8-year-old girls in the middle, and the questions that they've asked me about all types of stuff, because there is a homosexual agenda that's been passed down, and so my kids have said, well, can 2 men get married? Well, wait, how did they have a baby? And how do they have sex? And just the thoughts of it keep rolling, because once you start wondering about one thing, and I'm sitting there having to talk to my 6-year-old about stuff that decades ago you would have never had to talk to your kids about, because it's really just none of their business, whether it's
At 6 years
heterosexual
old.
or homosexual.
And it's not floating around.
But the
Yeah.
information is so pervasive right now and in their face that you unfortunately have to have those conversations, because otherwise the world's going to fill that void and come in and tell them all types of stuff.
Right. Yeah. It's really hard to, it's Dr. Dobson had a book years ago, Raising PG Kids in an X-rated World or something like that, Raising G Kids in an X-rated World. And that's really where we are.
It's just trying to keep their childhood,
Right.
some
Let them
semblance
be
of
kids for a while.
innocence, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ann Arbor, Michigan, a abortion clinic there has butchered some woman. But the interesting thing is, and we've seen this many, many times, the 9/11 tape shows, here's the quote, "And I would like to request that the ambulance come to the back of the building with no sirens, please." Now, think about this. If an ambulance has to come, they're concerned about the health and safety of women, right? That's the reason we have abortion legalized. If you're going to demand that the ambulance come with no lights or sirens, are you protecting that woman?
They're obviously not getting there as fast as they could.
Right. And in a case like that, if she's got a perforated uterus and she's bleeding out, she's got a nicked uterine artery, literally seconds
matter.
can make a difference between whether she survives or not. And they're saying, please don't come with lights and sirens. Come around to the back of the building quietly.
Let's not draw attention to it. What's going on
Who are they protecting?
The abortion clinic.
The abortion
doc-
clinic,
the
right?
doctors, right.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, right? They don't care about this woman. They want to protect the abortion clinic.
Once you start off down the road of secrecy, which of course is,
Right.
the violence of abortion continues because it's shrouded in this secrecy, this privacy. You don't come off that road. It continues.
Right.
The abortion itself, they don't want it to be seen. The complications from abortion, they don't want that to be seen. The dangers, they don't want that to be shown either. Everything is hush, hush, keep it quiet.
The graphic images.
The images, which it ultimately shows what? They're ashamed of what they do.
Right.
But they won't admit that.
Well, they should be ashamed of what they do.
Yeah, that's right.
What they do is disgusting. A few years back, we were talking about, and I want to ask you to comment on this because I know you're touchy situation here.
Okay.
Sister Carol Keehan of the Catholic Hospital Association. Back during Obamacare, she was pushing it really hard.
Yeah.
And we talked about it on this show. She knew at the time that it was going to pay for abortion. She knew at the time that Barack Obama was lying through his teeth when he said it wouldn't. All the signs were there. She knew this, and she pushed it anyway. Now, Obama was giving a speech in Washington, D.C. at the Catholic Health Association conference in D.C. He was bragging about the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. And he said, we would not have gotten the Affordable Care Act done had it not been for Sister Keehan. I want to thank the entire Catholic Health Association for the incredible work that you do. These people are directly, not indirectly, directly complicit in abortion. I don't care what anybody says. That's what's happened. And I think Pope John Paul II had some pretty strong words about, did he not?
He had very strong words about, well, even the United States bishops have said about in the documents about how these institutions cannot have any role in abortion, right. And yet in the reality we see things like this. And in fact, that was the same speech that President Obama said, made reference to the dignity of the children, and every child should be
right.
given his or her full potential. I mean, what kind of twisted, contradictory statements are these?
I don't know.
It's really. But that's right, and there's got to be a purification that has to happen here. I mean, just because, and President Obama exploits this all the time, going back to, for example, just list all kinds of examples, but the Notre Dame commencement, taking an honor from a Catholic institution which shouldn't have been giving it in the first place, but he walks right into that and exploits the division within the Catholic community about, what's the right path to take here with public policy, with health care, and so forth. And he just, they're both to blame. The institution giving him the platform and him walking right into it to exploit division within the Catholic community and to try to take the label or appear to have the blessing and endorsement of the Catholic Church. And he gives a talk like that and he quotes Pope Francis. And, he'll leave out all Pope Francis's comments about how abortion is, death penalty for the children. And he'll conveniently ignore that. But then the news will carry it and make it look to uninformed Catholics like this guy is right in line with the church.
But given who Barack Obama is, that's fully to be expected.
Absolutely.
The man's a pathological liar. He's a heretic. He's a godless Marxist. You can't set the bar too low for people like that. But they should not have had this guy within 1,000 yards of this place.
We have to make a choice of what it's going to be. Now, this, as you know, we've talked here on the program before. My book is going to come out next month,
right.
Abolishing Abortion, and a number of chapters there take very, very direct issue with these institutions that are just not living out what they claim to be. And I make the argument, it's time to sacrifice what we're going to need to sacrifice to stay true to the sanctity of life.
Right. We've had a couple of shows here lately, and we're totally out of time. But on the abortion reversal, we've done two consecutive shows on that. A law was attempted in Arizona that would have required abortion clinics to tell women that if you change your mind, it may be possible to reverse this. The pro-aborts, of course, went berserk. They don't want women changing their mind. And that's been put on hold for right now. But they're attacking these people, and we had him on last month, the doctor that's involved in that, and had him on talking about that. And he has been under some attack, and that's going to continue because they want women choosing abortion. They don't want them unchoosing it. That's for certain. We're seeing, you mentioned a moment ago about money, and it's affecting the in the abortion battle. A pro-abortion woman, 26-year-old, 7 weeks pregnant, and says she is going to have an abortion, but she has given the pro-life movement 72 hours to raise $1 million and give it to her. And if they'll do that, she won't have the abortion.
She'll keep the baby. Yeah, give it up for adoption.
Place the baby for adoption.
Adoption, yeah.
Isn't that extortion?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that basically what it is? I won't kill this baby if you'll give me $1 million.
I had an abortionist say that to me one time, a practicing abortionist. Well, for $1 million, I will be able to stop doing abortions. As if he doesn't have any responsibility to stop killing people.
It's all ours. Kristen Newhouse, an abortionist in Kansas, who lost her license because she was rubber stamping the late-term abortions that George Tiller was doing. Because in Kansas, after a certain point, you were supposed to say this baby had problems or this woman was going to die. You had to have some medical reason for it. And she was the one who was just rubber stamping the abortion. And so she lost her license. Now, she is this GoFundMe website where you put on there you need something, you need tires for your car, and people are supposed to give money to put tires in your car. She's trying to raise $100,000 on there under a GoFundMe campaign because
She's desperate.
She's desperate. She lost her license and can't practice medicine.
The irony of saying, I need this money in order to stop, that would be like someone walking up and holding a gun to someone's head and saying, I'm going to kill them unless you go ahead and pay for my next 6 months' rent or whatever it is. I mean, that would be unfathomable, but when it comes to abortion, somehow they make it seem like we're the bad ones because we're not going to pay them to not kill someone.
Well, imagine a guy picks up a little dog off the streets and does a video and holds the dog up and says, here's a knife, here's the dog. If
you have 72 hours.
I'm going to give you guys 72 hours to give me $1 million or I'm going to cut this dog's throat. Would we say that the people who didn't give the $1 million are at fault, or would we say that this guy's at fault? We'd hunt him down like a dog in the streets that he is, right?
Now I'm picturing the doggy holding up a little newspaper and being like, please, please save me. That's actually kind of adorable, but I like the analogy.
It's unbelievable, the mindset. And again, it goes to something we said here before. These people are mentally deranged. I don't care what anybody says. Pro-choice is a mental disease. It's a mental defect. And I don't think there's any way of getting it
Like
out.
I often say in my talks, all the different angles of the pro-life issue, the medical, the purely scientific, the religious. But psychologists and psychiatrists, as this movement moves on to victory, and then in years to come when we're just looking back at this nightmare, they're going to have a field day analyzing this.
Yes, they are. All right, we've got another interesting thing that's happened that I'm really excited about. Remember when we introduced My Alpha 21, they have a film festival at the march in Selma every year, commemorating the Bloody Sunday, and it's in March, and they chose My Alpha 21 as the featured film at that film festival that year, and we were really honored by that. And we actually went down there, sent some people down there, and I went, and it was a very interesting experience, and it was really historic to be there on that bridge where all this happened. But anyway, that has now grown, and there's now a second march just for the pro-life issue. And it just happened this past weekend, and joining us you're in Georgia, is that right, Catherine?
Yes.
You're back in Georgia right now. This is Catherine Davis, founder and president of the Restoration Project. Now, you guys went and did a second march, not associated with the original one in the month of March, but you did a one this past weekend marching over the bridge just as it relates to the pro-life issue. Is that correct?
That's correct. We marched because Selma has an illegal abortionist. He is not licensed by the state to do abortions, and the state of Alabama is, in effect, turning a blind eye and allowing this guy to continue to abort babies, even though he has not complied with the law there. And we have found that, of across the country, the states seem to be turning a blind eye to these abortionists who break the criminal and civil laws of their state, and they have no repercussions for it. So we were marching to draw attention to the fact that abortionists seem to be given a pass by the states when it comes to law enforcement.
Yeah,
And because of that, they're not only killing millions of babies, but they are also injuring women and subjecting them to substandard medical care.
well, this goes exactly to what we were talking about earlier.
That's right.
I'll guarantee you this. If this guy she's talking about in Selma kills somebody, that will not be counted by the CDC as a death due to abortion, because they're going to say that was an illegal abortion because it was an illegal clinic, and they will not count it.
Yeah.
They'll
that's
count
right.
it as a
That's
death, as a complication of pregnancy.
Yeah. Well, and Catherine, of course, as you know, this is a pattern, and that's what Catherine invited me to speak at this Selma event. At the last minute, I couldn't go because of an emergency. But the point is that this is a pattern across America, and it's the Gosnell legacy, really.
Right.
And you look at how the Department of Health in Pennsylvania got complaints, didn't intervene. The Department of State that runs the Board of Medicine got complaints, didn't intervene. People saw the conditions. Nobody said anything. Nobody did anything. How long are we going to let these people get away with this? And that, of course, was the purpose of the Selma event.
Right. Well, and Renee and I did that interview with those 3 employees of Carpens down in Houston. And I'm telling you, Renee and I've talked about this. All we're waiting on now is the other shoe to drop. He's going to kill somebody. He's done it before. He's killed a 15-year-old girl several years ago. We've got the documents here in the office. But he's going to do it again. They're going to have other tragedies down there. We're just waiting on the other shoe to drop, because the state of Texas refuses to do anything about it, just like every other state, just like you're seeing there in Selma, Alabama.
And it's across the country, and there are women dying. I mean, we remember Tanya Reid, that Planned Parenthood left laying there bleeding for 5 hours. We remember Lakeisha. We remember young Tamia Russell, 15-year-old girl, impregnated by a 24-year-old man, and was taken at 6 months pregnant to an abortion center there in Michigan, and he gave her RU-486 of all things, and that drug, is not supposed to be used beyond 9 weeks. And that young lady hemorrhaged to death, and that abortionist just continued doing abortions without repercussions by the state. And it's a huge issue that most people don't know and they don't understand. That, we think when these women are going into these abortion centers that they're being inspected and held to the same medical standards as any other surgical center in the country, and they're not. And that's what Texas was all about, right, Mark? Right there in your backyard.
Right.
Planned Parenthood and all of them were marching and shouting because Texas said, raise these centers to ambulatory surgical center levels. And they're shamming Americans into believing that it's safe for women to go in there, and it's not.
That's right. And we talked at length earlier in the show about that. The moment that they had to meet the same medical standards as other ambulatory surgical centers, 3/4 of them in the state closed down. Mm-hmm. They can't do it, and they're saying that Texas may wind up with no abortion clinics. Wouldn't that be a tragedy? Mm. But let me ask you this, Catherine. Are you finding pretty good reception to the pro-life message and to the message of black genocide that we brought up in Alpha 21? I know we gave you a supply in my office to hand out down there. Are you finding a good reception to that?
Oh, absolutely. And let me just say that as a result of what we did this past weekend, reports are already coming in. A dear friend of mine out of Illinois, who happens to be related to our ex-Attorney General of the United States, had been estranged from some members of her family for taking a pro-life stance, and they had called her crazy. She's one of the ones that came with us to Selma. She called me yesterday and said one of the cousins that had not spoken or interacted with her in more than a couple of years called her yesterday and said, I get it. And she is now pro-life.
Wow.
So we are making a difference. And tools like MyAFA, marches like we did across the Selma Pettis Bridge are absolutely working. They are working, and we can't let up now. We have to keep pushing forward with our message, both exposing the genocide, but also exposing the substandard medical care that probably 90+% of the abortionists in this country are supplying to women.
Yes. As far as giving up, you mentioned, we can't back off now or give up now. There's no mention of giving up or backing off. I promise you that. But let me ask you, Catherine, is this going to be an annual event, or is this a one-time deal, or what are the plans now for the future?
No, it's not going to be an annual event. But what is happening now is women from across the country are calling and asking if we will come to their state with this message. So I am right now in the midst of planning how do we go state by state in response to the requests that are coming in. Will you come to my state capital and make this demand? So I'm believing that that's the next step. We'll begin to go into the states like Illinois, Ohio, even there in Texas, come to each state and say, will you enforce these laws now that you have them?
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, listen, Catherine, make sure that we have, and I'm not just saying this because we put it out, but we have seen, and I think you've seen, that MyAFA is an amazing tool to kind of jab people into action and to make them see things that they haven't seen before. That's been the number one.
Oh, absolutely, Mark. Absolutely. I can't tell you the testimonies I've had from across the country. I had done that event with the hair trade show here in Atlanta, where we gave out thousands of MyAFAs. And the feedback and the testimony, when people see that documentary, it is stunning to them, and they're like, I didn't know. So because of that, we have had pastors now coming to the National Black Pro-Life Coalition and saying, how do I get involved? What do I do? How do we help shape this message? It hasn't completely swept the black community yet, but I tell you, we are way down the road further than we were 5-6 years ago before MyAFA 21 was released. We are really, that movie is really making a huge impact on our fight for life in communities of color.
Well, we appreciate that. And, we've put out about 175,000 of the DVDs so far, plus it's been shown in theaters and community centers and stuff, and it's been on television a couple of times. But we don't, like you said, we don't want to back off now. We want to ratchet things up, and we've got some ideas about how we can ratchet things up. So when you're having these events like that, and I know we have donated a lot of my office to you in the past, and others that are involved in it, Clenhard and Johnny and Alveda King and so forth. Let's don't forget about that. Let's make sure that you always have a supply of these things, because it seems like to me every person that watches MyAFA gets 2 or 3 other people to watch it.
That's exactly right.
So,
that's right.
It's a very good viral marketing tool for us to use, and so we want to make sure that you're always having some, regardless of what the financial situation is.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and thank you for what you're doing, and just keep us informed. And if you need more of my office, just let us know.
We sure will. God bless.
Thank you, Catherine.
God bless you, Catherine. Yeah, Mark, we see with our work with Alveda on our Preach for Life team, she's always coming back from trips.
Right.
Talking about, how MyAFA makes an impact. And, it's bringing the black community to a point of crisis in the sense that so many of them are being awakened to the tragedy of abortion, not only as a genocide, but as all the harm being done to the moms and the families. And then they say, well, we've got to do something about it. And then they look at their political leaders and their allies in the Democratic Party and they say, well wait a minute. Then now we're going to offend them,
right?
Because they're all pro-abortion, or just for the most part, anyway. And it's like it's a real dilemma for them now, and we've got to help them also break through that next level and say, listen, what's more important, these political loyalties or the sanctity of life.
But let me tell you something. You guys working with Alveda, though, you have as a Catholic organization, you have a roadmap for this, and I'll tell you why. If you go back, let's say into the 1960s and the 1970s, the Catholic Church, many Catholics in this country were in that exact same situation.
That's right.
Because all of a sudden, they're looking up here saying, wait a minute, this abortion thing is out of control. I had no idea about this. We got to do something about that. But wait a minute, Catholics are historically Democrats.
Yes.
And I mean, overwhelmingly Democrat.
Yes.
Mainly because of labor unions. That was the biggest issue, especially in the Northeast or in the northern part of the United States. And you had this kind of dilemma there. These Catholics were saying, well, we're a union family, we're strongly Democrat and so forth, but I can't support these people in doing this.
Right.
And I think, well, John Paul II had a big hand in making these people see, wait a minute, I understand this issue over here, and I understand all the things that the Democratic Party stands for, that you support and all that, but you can't ignore the butchering of these babies.
Exactly.
We just have to step out in faith and do what's right.
You do what's right, let the chips fall
just
where
like
they
Martin
may.
Luther King said, right? You
Yeah.
do what's right, you say what's right. And John Paul, he like you're saying, his statements were so strong. He said that the cry for human rights, the outcry for human rights, is false and illusory if you don't defend the foundational right, which is life.
Right.
And that's got to be the message for everybody, Democrats and everybody else.
Right.
Yes.
And so we saw the Catholics go from overwhelmingly pro-abortion, Democrat, to overwhelmingly Republican on the life issue.
On the life issue, that's right.
And we can see the same thing happen in the black community. And you guys already have a framework for that. I mean, it happened in your community.
Right.
And I think I think we're at the very embryonic stages, if you want to use that term, in the embryonic stages of that happening in the black community.
I think so, yeah.
They're starting to say, wait a minute, we've been deceived all these years. We can't ignore this.
Well, you know what I've been talking about with Alveda too, and the rest of our team is with things like this. We see these things bubbling up, like with Selma. We want to see in various cities around the country gatherings of hundreds of African Americans in front of abortion facilities.
Right.
I mean, then you're going to start to really. That's going to start making some news.
Right.
As well, and that's exactly what should happen.
We've got to expand our horizons.
Yeah.
We're trying to do it with Bikers for Life, and we've done it with Maafa 21, and we're looking at some other projects that we can bring people that are not traditionally associated with the pro-life movement, but who are pro-life, and trying to bring them into the movement. But again, I think that the Catholic influence can't be overstated here, because you guys did exactly the same thing that African Americans are now faced with.
That's right.
And having to say, well, what's my bigger loyalty? Is my bigger loyalty to human life and to God, or is it to the Democratic Party?
Yeah.
And when they were faced with that, and the guy that really called them on this, if you think about it for a minute, was a guy who wasn't Catholic, was Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, that's right.
Ronald Reagan is the one who first captured the Catholic vote based on the life issue, and that was paramount. I mean, that was a turning point in the pro-life movement when that happened.
It sure was.
And we're going to see the same thing happen here again.
I think the more people we have like Alveda King standing up and speaking out about this scourge on African American women and women of color, the more we're going to see women saying, oh, we can be pro-life, we can speak out about it. Because the thing that I found very interesting from a feminist perspective was I started looking around at all these feminist icons, and very few of them speaking for abortion are African American. And I thought, if we look at the numbers statistically, African American women have more abortions, and they have multiple abortions because they're targeted. So you would think that they would be bigger proponents for keeping it legal, but I think what we see happen is they know the damage it's done to their community. It's almost become a necessary evil, but they're not promoting it. And then they look at their, Caucasian feminist sisters, and they're not talking about poverty alleviation or getting in there and helping women. They're saying, look, here's what we'll give you. We'll fight for your right to kill your kid. That's the answer that white feminists have given to African American feminists. And I think that's why you don't see more African American women standing up and fighting for abortion, because they know how much it is hurting their communities.
They've been lied to.
Absolutely.
They've been lied to. And, the point we were trying to make with Maafa is, if you want to support legalized abortion, we can't stop you. You do that. But at least do it with your eyes open and understand this had nothing to do with women's rights. It had nothing to do with choice or reproductive freedom or any of that nonsense. This was about eradicating the black population. That was this that was what abortion was legalized to do. That's what it's doing. And if you want to support it, then you just go right ahead, but at least do it with your eyes open and know what's happening here. And Maafa is opening a lot of eyes for these people. You know, we've had a lot of, you know, we get the phone calls here and said, I didn't know this. I had no idea about this. You know, I had no idea this was going on. With the time we got left, I want to talk about something here kind of philosophical. First off, though, I want to talk about the South Carolina shootings in this church. Obviously a horrible situation, but before I do, Jermaine Greer, one of the originators of the abortion holocaust in America, who wrote the Female Eunuch, which is kind of almost a Bible for some leftist feminist in the country, is now coming out and saying that she's got concerns. Her quote is, quote, "The concept of motherhood is emptied out. It's gone," unquote. Well, who caused this?
Whose fault was that?
Yeah, you know, you're not going to come out and try to get on the right side of these issues. Compulsory motherhood is not ennobling. The compelled mother loves her child as the caged bird sings. The song does not justify the cage nor love the enforcement. Does anybody, I don't speak gibberish. Can somebody translate this for
I
me?
had a really hard time reading that.
Right. But the fact is, these are the people, she's whining now, and you know, we've talked here before about how my view is that abortion has destroyed the maternal instinct in this country, and we see this in lots of areas.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the pro-aborts out there who spy in on our show or hear me say this on a radio program or something, you know, say, oh, God, this guy's nuts, or well, now here's one of your own saying the same things, but she won't take responsibility for being one of the people that caused it. It's mind-boggling.
I think when you look at the radical feminist movement, a big part of what they're trying to do is erase all signs of femininity in general. And there should be no gender binary. You know, boys should be able to wear makeup and girls should be able to, I don't know, not shave their pits or whatever it is that like they're getting hot and bothered about these days. But you see them trying to get rid of that. And then you have something like the Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner thing come out where you have a man who says, I feel like a woman though. I want to paint my fingernails and wear corsets and stuff. And the interesting thing that's happening is there's actually kind of a conflict between the trans community and the feminist community because they're so caught up in their own BS right now that it's imploding on them of, wait, hold on, you're reinforcing all of the things that we're trying to get rid of over here. And I think that's where new wave feminism, what I believe in, is completely different. We're embracing and celebrating what makes women amazing and what makes men amazing because we are unique.
And they're not
we're
the same.
not the same. We're unique and different. And until we get to that point, calling it feminism is, I mean, it's humanism. It's trying to settle for this level of equality where whatever men can have and women can have, and we can have the base level of all of it. But there's nothing uniquely feminine or inherently amazing. I mean, what women are capable of is phenomenal. And until we start celebrating that, that's not true feminism.
Well, first off, let's make sure we understand our terms here. We're talking about neo-feminism versus classical feminism. Because classical feminists were all pro-life. They understood that abortion would be used to profit sexually irresponsible and sexually predatory males. That's who profited from it, and that's what we see every day. We report it on here. We report on it here every month. Some of the stories we've talked about here today of men killing women. We did a report on it, putting them in nursing homes, putting them in permanent vegetative states because they refused to have abortions. This is what the early feminists, the true feminists, classical feminists, all knew. They all understood that. It's the neo-feminists who were taken over by the abortion lobby and by the genocide lobby that was trying to get rid of African Americans. They were co-opted by them. Yep. That's the group that you're talking about.
Luckily, I think the pendulum is swinging back and more women are waking up and starting to see that.
That they've been lied to.
Absolutely.
And anyway, let's talk about this situation in South Carolina. Obviously, you can't overstate the horror of what happened here.
Right.
And even some of the smaller things that happened. For example, the guy saying he had second thoughts about killing all these people because they were so nice to him. Yeah. And these people brought him in and welcomed him in. And he said they were really nice to me. And I'm thinking, hey, I'm going to start shooting here in a minute. And I kind of hate to do this because these are nice people, right? But he did anyway. He went ahead with it. But the thing that has angered me about this deal, and I'll tell you something else. If you ever saw the way Christ wants us to respond, you saw it in the people in that church.
Absolutely.
I mean, within hours, they're saying, look, we forgive this guy. We're praying for him.
Mm-hmm.
He's obviously misdirected. He's got emotional problems. He's got psychological problems. Something's happened to this kid. They're praying for him. While I remember seeing that one kid whose mom had been killed, and he said, "I'm praying for this man. I've lost my mom, and I'll never see her again, and we're all going to miss her and all that." But it was amazing to watch.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It was truly amazing to watch. The thing that has angered me about this deal, I've watched some of these shows on television where you have these panels, and these are all the deep thinkers, right? Furrowed brows, and they're smarter than all the rest of us. And we've got to think about what's causing this. Oh, it's the gun culture. Oh, it's video games. And it's we have this nationwide loss of respect for human life. We don't value human life like we used to. And they'll go down all the list. I watched one the other night that lasted an hour. And this whole panel of people, some of whom would tell you they're pro-life, they go down this whole list of reasons this may be occurring, and what should we do about it, and what should we not do, and let's don't have a knee-jerk reaction about gun control. Let's don't have a knee-jerk reaction about video games, or no, those are the problems. Nobody ever mentioned abortion.
Not a mention.
Not
what a
word.
blind spot. Blind spot.
And I watched a deal the other night with Sean Hannity, who I know that you know him, and I don't have much respect for this guy. And his claim to be pro-life, I think, is completely 100% hollow. It means nothing to this guy. But he was one of these people on one of these panels. And he claims to be so hardcore pro-life. Never mentioned it. Mm-hmm. Never brought it up. How can you, in a culture that has now devolved to this point, where we see these things relatively common now, how can you say we're going to have a discussion about what's leading up to this loss of respect for human life, but we're not going to talk about abortion?
You know, among the people who are bringing up the link, aside from folks like us and our viewers who don't apologize for bringing up abortion, are two categories of people come to my mind right away. First of all, saints. Mother Teresa, remember when she spoke at the National Prayer Breakfast in 1994, the famous quote, "If we allow that the mother can kill her own child, how can we tell people not to kill each other?"
Right.
And that's a challenge that remains in our culture. And then the second group of people, psychiatrists. People like Dr. Philip Ney from Canada, who constantly is hammering on this point. The violence that you allow in the womb is not going to stay in the womb. It can't. And he talks about the survivor syndrome, and we talked again on this program about our Healing the Shockwaves initiative. This is what we're exposing throughout this year, is that there are shockwaves, and you permit a little bit of violence. Violence isn't satisfied. You're gonna be permitting a lot of violence that you don't want, and it's you got to look at it. What does a culture say to somebody when their life is not protected, and then they're going to be more prone to see violence as a solution. It's got to be looked at.
And they're just ignoring it. And I keep on thinking about something again we've talked about here before. A Supreme Court justice who in 1972 issued a ruling in opposition to the death penalty, which I support that. I'm an opponent of the death penalty. But in his ruling, he said, allowing the death penalty can do nothing but cheapen our respect for human life. This is Blackmun, right? Less than a year after he said that, he wrote Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
And I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'll go to my grave saying this. This man was one of the most, if you read about him, and you read about the history of how he wrote the majority opinion in Roe, this man was pathologically evil. Adolf Hitler had nothing on Blackmun. Harry Blackman, I guarantee you. But just think about the disconnect. I mean, if he was here and say, okay, you believe in abortion, that's fine. But how can you write that about the death penalty? And you're correct about that. How can you write that about the death penalty and less than a year later write Roe versus Wade? How can you do that?
How can Roe v. Wade not cheapen the sense of the worth of
Right.
human life?
So
How can it
we
not?
might execute a couple of hundred people
Yeah.
nationwide, and that's going to destroy our respect for human life. But we can
Millions,
execute 1.5 million a year.
Right, right.
Oh, that doesn't have any effect. It's the lack of logic there is mind-numbing.
It's mind-numbing.
It is. It truly is. And I don't know. I heard somebody the other night, one of those people on that Hannity situation, saying, I don't know how many more people are going to have to be killed with handguns before we wake up to this tragedy of handguns. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not what's in people's hands that's the problem. It's what's in their hearts.
That's right.
And you can take away all the handguns in the world, and this guy would have used a bomb. He could have driven a car. We've seen that happen before. Drive a car into a crowd of people.
That's right. It's the evil inside the person.
If you don't control what's in their heart, you'll never control what's in their hand, and that's nonsense. And what's in the heart is created by this. If you think about it from the moment of fertilization to the moment of natural death, 90 years later or whenever it occurs, the most vulnerable stage of that life is the life while it's still in the womb. If we won't protect them, and they're the most vulnerable of that whole chain, if we won't protect them, why would we protect anybody else?
I believe that there are a lot of people, maybe some of even those on these panels, that are thinking about this connection. They're thinking, because how can anyone who's even aware of abortion not at least think about it, the thought go through their mind? The fear here is about saying it. The fear here is about saying it. And, it reminds me of the psychological experiments that took place after the Genovese incident, Kitty Genovese in New York. And they bring a guy into a room and smoke starts coming out from under the room next door. This is all part of the experiment. And he gets up and he says something. Hey, we got a problem, we got a fire. And they put 3 guys in the room, the smoke comes out, they don't do anything. They're fanning themselves, they're coughing, nobody moves a muscle, nobody complains. Why? Because they're not just looking at the smoke, they're looking at the non-reaction of the other 2 people in the room.
Right.
And I think what's going on here is we're all reinforcing each other in the silence. Oh, we don't want to exploit the situation by bringing abortion into it. We don't want to seem like we're minimizing the tragedy there in South Carolina. We're not minimizing the tragedy. Right. In fact, I would argue that those of us who battle for the sanctity of life appreciate the tragedy as much as anybody can.
More.
And more. It's not that tragedy that we're minimizing. It's abortion that we're minimizing. We've got to stop doing that.
But the issue comes back to courage. You mentioned Mother Teresa in that 1994.
Yeah.
What you didn't point out was.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah. This woman is up here making this 90-year-old, 80-pound woman, right? And sitting as close to her as Renee is sitting to me was Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton.
And she looked right at him.
That's right.
She had the courage to do what none of the men in that prayer breakfast had the courage to do.
It was only a few months after that speech that I visited with her for the first time in Calcutta, and I said, Mother Teresa, many of the American people loved your speech at the prayer breakfast. She said, oh, really? She says, what about the rest of them?
But she had the courage.
Yeah.
It didn't matter to her. Hey, that guy right there is the President of the United States.
Yeah. No.
Right? Most powerful. Didn't matter to her.
No.
She said, this man is wrong.
That's right.
This man is evil, and I'm going to confront him over it. And she did.
She sure did.
With him sitting right there. And I'm sure that Bill and Hillary are over there squirming in their chairs because they're basically hearing from God right here. Yeah. Right?
That was a moment of judgment right there.
Right. Yeah. That's right. She is passing judgment right there. But anyway, well, it's a great show, guys. Appreciate it. And I guess we'll be looking to see all of you back next month. But we're out of time.
I think I missed next month.
Yeah, I think you missed next month.
But I'll be back the following month.
You'll be back the following month. Anyway, thanks again. Great show. Well, that's it for this month. And don't ever forget, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how the killing stops. We'll see you in August.